We're so generous with the world. We give so much to the world. We sacrifice so much to the world and for the world. Anything from our youth, our time, our money, our energies. And sometimes that is the best escape. The best escape because it takes away some responsibility from ourselves, from dedicating it to do some cleansing. And what I mean by that is what you have just done. You are now very generous with yourselves by giving yourself just a few moments, a few minutes to sit, create this tiny little oasis, a little island for yourselves, to just allow yourself to be. And I would like to invite you to do this and to get into the habit of doing this whenever you can. It doesn't have to be in the morning. It doesn't have to be once a week. It doesn't have to be any particular time. However, to develop a practice, a discipline, that's wonderful. But if you find yourself in a very busy atmosphere with so many responsibilities, then you can go ahead and just do what you just did. 5-10 minutes. So many times we don't do this. And that's what I mean by us being so generous with the world. Well, I have to catch up with the traffic, so I have to leave the house 5-10 minutes earlier. I have to do this assignment for my work or at school, so I cannot afford to sit for 5-10 minutes. That's what I mean by generosity. It's not the healthy kind of generosity. A little while ago, one of the youngest members of this community, Eden, whom I just met, a wonderful, bright, young fella, he was asking me some very interesting questions about life, about rebirth, about his desires. And that shows some level of curiosity. The Buddha used to call children deluded for good reason, because there's so much going on. They cannot be clear, they don't have the wisdom yet to process. However, as we grow older, as we mature, as we develop different skills of understanding the world around us and how to navigate through life, how much of that curiosity as to asking ourselves, what is it that I am still focusing most of my energy on? Because ultimately we only have this, your body, your life right now. Last night I was at a gathering and a lady was asking me from the crowd about life, about responsibilities. And I asked her a very simple question. I said, 5 minutes. What if somebody knocks on the door and comes in and says, you only have 5 minutes to live? What would you do? You know, other people jumped in and they said, well, it's not enough. It's not fair. In 5 minutes, I mean, I have to sit down and plan. And I said, 5 minutes. It forces you to sit down and be very sharp with what is important to me. See, when Eden was asking me those questions, he was living in that moment. He was completely grabbed in that level of curiosity, saturated in that mindset of asking and wanting to find out. In our lives, we have forgotten to be that dedicated to ourselves. See, generosity happens from here first. And what I mean by that is, you do not necessarily want to have any kind of business transactions with life in general when it comes to just this person. Seeking happiness starts from here. So when I mentioned a little bit earlier ago about being forgiving towards yourself, and then loving kindness to be brought into your mind, that's immediate. The effect of it is immediate. Similarly with generosity. As I was thinking about what subjects to think about in sharing Dhamma with you today, the one theme that kept coming up was that of seeking refuge and security in life. You see, whether we like it or not, we're always looking for some sense of security. Years ago, there was this psychologist, researcher. His name was Abraham Maslow. And one of the things that he talked about was the hierarchy of needs, which is like a triangle or a pyramid, which starts from it has several layers, like a cake layer. The bottom one is basically seeking some sense of security, getting your needs met. What do I mean by that? Food, shelter, love in your life, having someone taking care of you, connection with other human beings. And then slowly, it becomes more and more refined, and it goes from being so socially oriented towards being so self-actualized. In fact, that is what it's called. The top layer of the pyramid is called self-actualization. What most of us get stuck on is the most bottom. I want security for myself and my family, and that's where it stops. And we forget about ourselves. We forget about the cleanliness of the mind. Cleanliness of the mind. When the Buddha talked about and presented the Eightfold Path, he made sure he was talking about right mindfulness. And he used it constantly. You find it in different disciplines within the Dharma. But he also talked about the importance of right concentration, which is very connected with right lifestyle, right speech, right action. Okay. Where does that, or how does that relate with the sense of refuge and security? You know, in the Chinese zodiac, when we talk about, the year of the boar or the pig, it's one of the symbols that it has is prosperity, right? It also is intelligent. A pig happens to be one of the most intelligent animals. Okay. But the thing which caught me was the word prosperous, prosperity. And I look around and I see people in my life, how they are so secure, or trying to be so secure in the amount of children they have, in the relationships they have, in the health that they have. So many people are dedicated to making sure that they have a healthy body or a healthy bank account, making sure they have a good savings plan for themselves, for their children. In some cultures, they want to make sure that they have more boys than girls. Why? Because it's a safety blanket. It's a safety net. It's an insurance policy. But when we think about all these in connection to the Dharma, you see that none of these things are valid. What I mean by valid is in accordance to the Dhamma itself. Now, this is shocking for many people. And when I give Dhamma talks, I usually try to get to the most important aspects of life in the very short time that I'm going to be sharing Dhamma with you. How will you be benefiting from the talk? that would be different in influencing you from the moment you walked in to the moment that you're leaving? Will you be taking with you something that you can use? That is crucial for me as a Dhamma teacher. So, seeking refuge. So what are some of the things that we can use as our refuge, as our insurance policy, as our security blanket in life? We talked about children, family, which is important. No one's undermining these. However, how much emphasis is being laid upon them? Health. Health is important. But so many people say, no. If they see a gray hair, they want to go ahead and quickly dye it. I have some students who just don't want to see the gray hair, and that's perfectly fine. And sometimes it's the demands of their lives, the society or the business does not allow it, and that's perfectly okay. But ultimately, that's the key word, ultimately, how much emphasis or sense of security do we place on that thing? Whether it's a relationship. So many people come and ask me about, okay, I want to be in a very good, solid relationship with a partner. I want to fall in love with the most amazing woman. I want to fall in love with the most amazing guy. Okay, and then what? I was sitting the other day, and a friend of mine, he's in his 70s or something. He was talking with some other people of like age, and he was sharing how suddenly his wife died. She was also in her 70s. And I asked, suddenly? Like, okay, what were you expecting to take place? Were you expecting to live forever? I mean, when I say that question, when I say it out loud, people say, but yeah, of course. I mean, we were not thinking that, but really, every time we're taking care of our bodies and being completely pulled into that and saying, oh no, I can't get sick, I can't. But this is a body. It's supposed to get wrinkled. It's supposed to get withered. It's supposed to die. And the same goes for relationships. Now, that doesn't mean that we should just, okay, forget it. Who needs relationships? Let's go into a mountaintop and sit in a cave and be alone. No one's saying that. The Buddha taught about two different truths. One is a conventional truth, and the other one is absolute truth, a supramundane truth. Nibbana is a supramundane truth, something that goes beyond these phenomena. And one of the things that he talked about, he realized when he became enlightened, was impermanence. He made 3 declarations on the night of his enlightenment. He said, there's impermanence. There's suffering. He didn't say life is suffering. I was trying to make a point yesterday with someone who thought that Buddhism, the Dhamma, is, as a Buddhist, you're supposed to be pessimistic. And I said, no. You're getting it wrong. See, if the Buddha stopped at the Four Noble Truths, if he stopped at number 1, which is dukkha, which is suffering, then they're right. Then yes, Buddhism is a very pessimistic religion. But it's not. He had truth number 2. There's a cause of suffering, he said. And that's what we're trying to find out more about. So when we are attaching ourselves to wealth, to our body, to our health, I don't want to get sick. I don't know of anyone who's lived forever. The Buddha himself died. But what you do while you are alive, while you're taking good care of your body, what you're doing with it, that can bring you tremendous sense of refuge and security. And that is the path. That is the Buddhist path that we practice. So what I would like you to think about is a separation. Yes, you need wealth, of course. You need to be prosperous. No one should go and live on the streets. We need to be very diligent with our education so we cannot make those mistakes that some people make with their choices. You need to keep your body healthy. You need to take good care of it. You need to take care of your mind. You need to take good care of those loved ones around you, your family, your children, your society. Of course. But how much emphasis is being placed on that? And the same goes with prosperity, with the generosity. The ultimate generosity, for example, there's Buddha has given so many examples. At one point he says, if you look around you, if all the grains of sand in the world, on all the beaches and all of the seashores in the world, if they were turned into gold and you offered it to the Dhamma or to the Buddha, still they cannot come close, 1/16th of a one moment of genuine loving kindness that you experience and you share with another. You give something, a smile. See, I joke around every time I go to a coffee shop or somewhere, or somebody comes up and I see them frowning. I smile to them and say, can you be generous with your smile? Because everybody's like, stingy. We want to hide it. No, this is precious. It has to be the right moment for me to smile. I'm sorry. I don't know you. Why am I going to smile? Why not? First of all, I'm smiling for me. And that's what I meant earlier when I said forgiving towards yourself and being loving towards yourself. Now. When you're getting in your car to drive through a thick traffic, LA traffic, to go to a job that you're going to be sitting probably with a boss or a coworker or employees that might not be on the same page as you, might not like you, you might not like them. But at least for that brief few moments, you might be able to give yourself some loving kindness. And guess what? That is the tune. That is the music that's going to carry the rest of your day. It's simple. See, people think that the Dhamma is all about philosophical. You have to know the Abhidhamma, which is, forget it. I mean, I've studied it for over 20 years, and it was later developed, much later than the Buddha. And what people forget is the Buddhist path is all about practicality. Can you take what you are hearing, can you take from a segment of the suttas and apply it in your life now? One of the qualities of the Buddha is that it is immediately effective. See, historians sometimes are confused when they study the Dhamma and the history of its development. They're confused. How can kings, princes, wealthy people, intelligent people, philosophers at the time of the Buddha, they would go sit down with him for 5 minutes, all of a sudden they say, Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa, and they take refuge in the triple gem. They're surprised. How is it possible? This man was a Hindu, was a Brahmin. How can he leave his cultural loyalty, let's say, and all of a sudden take on this path? And I always invite people to put themselves historically into that setting. What would you and I be compelled by when we sit with someone? Their personality, what they're talking about, and how much we can take what they're saying and see, okay, can I apply this in my life right now? Can what I'm learning from you really improve my relationship with my spouse, with my children, with my father, with my mother, with my neighbor? And they saw that it does. And that's what distinguishes the Dhamma. Because there's a lovely story where a very well-known, wealthy and educated philosopher approaches the Buddha. And he is sitting among his students. And the Buddha points to two of his chief disciples, Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahamoggallana. Now, Venerable Sariputta was second in wisdom to the Buddha only. That's how top he was in his wisdom. And Venerable Mahamoggallana was second only to the Buddha in his psychic abilities. No one could match him. except for the Buddha, and surpass it. Now, the Buddha turns to both of them as he's addressing the philosopher, and he says, "You see these two chief disciples of mine?" And the man says, "Yes." And the Buddha says, "Do you know that they have zero faith? They don't believe in me. They don't believe in the Dhamma or the Sangha." And the man's jaw dropped. How could you call them your chief disciples if they don't believe in you? What the man did not understand was their life, their practice was based on actual living experience of the Dhamma. They don't have the need to believe in anything. See, as a Buddhist, ultimately we need to get to a point where we do not believe. This is, many people don't understand this when they talk about Buddhism. It's like, but it's a religion, right? You have millions of people everywhere in the world believing in practicing the Dhamma, right? The practicing Buddhism. And I say yes and no. The Buddha never wanted us to just believe. We have to practice it. So when you're practicing generosity, for example, let's start with your smile. Not $1, but smile. See, sometimes people have more of an easy time giving $100, $1,000, but not a smile. It just like freaks me out. Like, how is that possible? You worked so hard to get that money. And you're giving it away, but when it comes to your smile, you're not. Why? Because we're so used to holding that grudge. I'm not going to smile at you because I'm feeling bad. Why? Because the person on the freeway looked at me or cut in front of me and I'm angry. Who are you really stingy towards? You. So one of the first things that, you see, in contrast to all of the other religious figures that I've come across, I've never seen a frowning Buddha image. We don't see that. And if you do, check your mind. Or the mind of the person who carved the stone or something. But the softness we forget. The softness in our attitude. And that's where I want you to think about generosity first taking place. Your facial muscles relax. Persons will approach you when you're outside and they say, something is different about you. I don't know, or if they've never met you, they would say, I don't know, but I just felt like coming and saying hi or just smiling to you. And it becomes so infectious. At that point, you realize that you're practicing a form of refuge, a form of security that no time, no old age, no job loss is ever going to take away from you. See, I learned from my teachers, and most importantly from the Buddha himself, that the very last thought that we have, the very last feeling that we have on this planet, in this body, is so important as to where we end up and how we go. Even if you don't believe in rebirth, that's okay. Because the moment you start considering possibilities, your attitude in this moment of living changes. So what I'm introducing to you, what I'm trying to invite you to consider is that by smiling, you're allowing yourself to kind of let go of all these chains and bonds around your heart for a moment. For a moment. So I was thinking about this when I was watching my father die. So he was suffering for many weeks. And he had diabetes, and he was being taken care of every single day. So we were with him every single day. But one of the most important things that I would do is before he closed his eyes, before I left him every single day, at the end of the day, I would try to tell him things that he would laugh about. I would remind him of certain things, or I would start making voices or sounds, or be playful with him to remove him from whatever he saw himself experiencing. This was a man who was very healthy in the past. He was a bodybuilder. He had won championships. But now I was looking at him, his body is all crumpled up, old age, all these tubes in his body, doing dialysis almost daily. So he could see all that and he would feel like, I want to die. So his mind was in a dark, negative state because he's feeling so much pain. When you're leaving your house, I'm inviting you to come out of that dark place. When you're worried about how the day is going to be, how yesterday it was so bad, for example, and you're carrying over the burden of yesterday in this day, and you're sacrificing. You're being generous unnecessarily, giving away your peace of mind now to something that happened in the past, or worrying about something that could happen in the future, but you're sacrificing it. So what I would try to do is try to tell jokes, and just to try to ease some of the pain and worry that he might be experiencing. And that's what I did even the very last day. I was the very last person who saw him that day before he passed away. So it was almost past midnight. It was 12 something. And they had, I was about to leave it, so I sat next to him. Unfortunately, I couldn't talk to him about Dhamma too much because he came from a Christian background. I grew up in that world, obviously. But my path in the Dhamma had been over 30 years. Here and there, I dropped seeds of Dhamma in his subconscious without him knowing. I would talk to him about the Buddha. I would talk about some Jataka story. He wouldn't know it. But then slowly, I worked my way to talk to him about the Buddha. He trusted me, and he trusted my decision on this path. I even was able to record him one day when I asked his permission to become a Buddhist monk. Just in case, before he died. So I have it on video. Because it's one of the requirements. As a bhikkhu, if you want to take ordination, you have to get your parents, and that was one of the rules that the Buddha said. So my dad trusted me. So that night, even though he was unconscious, I held his hand. His facial muscles were tight. He was in pain. But for a brief moment, I whispered in his ears. And in the practice, and also in science, they say that the mind, although you might not see that they are hearing you, but they can really grasp. The perception might still be there to grasp you. And you can look for clues on the facial muscles, etc. And I told him some wonderful things about happiness. And his face relaxed. And he opened his eyes very little. I felt his happiness. And I said, now it's time for me to go, Dad. And it's time for you to go as well. Because he was in pain for such a long time. He was holding on. There might be a chance that I might get better. He was 81. And his body was all broken into pieces inside. And then he saw that there was no refuge in this body. There's something superior to that. And that was the experience of joy. The experience of happiness and forgiveness in his heart towards himself, towards life. And here was a human being, his son, talking to him and giving him nothing but love and forgiveness and getting nothing less than that from him. And then 5 hours later, I get the call that he had passed away. But guess what? He passed away in peace and joy. And I'm sharing something very personal with you because these things do happen where you really feel the ending of a life, but at the same time it's the beginning of another one. But how do you set it up? How do you leave your driveway in the morning? Are you dreading the day, or are you looking forward to it? Every day before I drive away, I just say, this is going to be an amazing day. And I have a Bodhi leaf in my car that's hanging, and it's from the Buddha's tooth temple in Kandy, Sri Lanka, where the Buddha's tooth relic is. So I bought it from there at the time. So I look at it and I just smile. It's just a drawing of a Buddha sitting. But my mind is set. That day is set already. I know. If anything, I'm just going to give one smile to one person today. Just one. Obviously I'm going to get more, but if I can do one, if I remember, I permit myself, and that becomes a good refuge for me to fall back on. Because this is not a complex path, folks. The Buddhist Dhamma can be complex. Don't get me wrong, it can be. But it does not have to be. So it's directly applicable in your life. If you just remember the Four Noble Truths, there is suffering. Okay, why is there suffering? It's because I'm holding on to something tightly. If I held on to my dad and said, please don't go. If I hold on to my youth and say, please don't go, and I see a gray hair, I was like, oh! Or my knees don't work because it's cold or something. That's me not accepting the fact that there is cold. And this is a body. It's going to hurt. If I don't look and I come down the stairs, I'm going to fall. And I'm going to have to take a bottle of Tylenol or something because it's going to be very painful. Don't take a bottle of Tylenol. But it's a matter of speaking. But so there's got to be that acceptance. So you mean to say that my pain, I am kind of responsible for it? Yeah. Yes. And oftentimes when we see someone that was very important in our lives leaving, for whatever reason, we go into this depression. I've seen it in people who have lost their jobs. I've seen it in people who say, well, like that person that I mentioned earlier who said, my wife suddenly died. Well, one of you is going to die first. That's guaranteed. For years I used to look for a perfect partner. And I would, like romantic and all that, you start thinking, yes, happily ever after, just like Disney. And it's like, wait a minute. One day she's going to get sick or I'm going to get sick. One of us is going to go. Okay. So how much happiness can I expect from that? Yes, it's great happiness, but it also comes with a big package of pain. See, one time the Buddha was asked about loved ones. And the person who was asking him expected the Buddha to say, loved ones. Life becomes meaningful because of loved ones. And guess what? The Buddha said the opposite. He said, they're the source of suffering. He was shocked. He was like, what? How could you say that about my mom, about my loved one, about my children? They're my loved ones. So the whole kingdom ended up knowing about what the Buddha had said. Finally, the king comes to the Buddha because his wife, Queen Malika, used to be a student of the Buddha. And the king and the queen one day, while having breakfast, they have an argument. The king says, do you believe that teacher of yours, Gautama, the Buddha? He thinks that loved ones are the source of suffering. And she asks him, Your Highness, do you believe that? I mean, are you sure that he was the one who said this? And he says, yes. Okay, then if my teacher said that, then it's got to be true, she says. So he's getting upset, and he says, you know what? I'm going to go and talk to the Buddha about this. So the king, with all his crowd, go and sits down and respects, obviously, the Buddha first, and sits down and says, teacher, is this true that you've said that loved ones are the source of pain and suffering? And the Buddha knows where he's coming from. And he says, King, do you have any children? And he says, of course. And he says, do you have a favorite? And he says, yes. And his face smiles, lights up. And he says, imagine he's riding a horse, his famous horse. And something happens and the horse falls, or your son falls and he breaks his leg. Already his face turns red, the king. His blood pressure is rising. His heart rate is rising. And the Buddha stops right there and says, what is happening to you right now? He says, I don't like what I'm hearing. He says, why? Because I don't want to see my son suffer, he says. He says, were you suffering before when I mentioned who's your favorite? He says, no. Now are you suffering? Yes. Where is that suffering coming from? He says, oh, now I understand what you're saying. Again, the practicality of the Dhamma. We so many times forget, and we want to put the Dhamma or our practice, our faith in a box and say, I can put it on whenever I want to. It's like an insurance policy. It does not have to be so. It's a practice. And you do not have to go and live in a monastery. You don't have to be a monk or a nun, whatever. All you have to do is remember to really be forgiving to yourself and really understand that the suffering that we experience, we have something to do with it. Because of our holding on to what we desire, what we want to happen or not happen. They're the same thing, in essence. And that is the second noble truth. Realizing that there's a cause for suffering. But the Buddha even didn't stop there. He said there's a third noble truth. And that is the cessation, the ending of suffering. The dukkha's end, which is Nibbana. And he didn't stop there because he was a very practical person. If I tell you, in order for you to go to Big Bear, I have to give you a map. Or you need to have a map. And that's the fourth noble truth, which is the Eightfold Path. You first have to have the right view. So in sharing the Dhamma, what a teacher does is sets you in the right path by giving you the right view. And that is why it's so important for us to know what message we're getting from teachers. This is a key point because if you look on the YouTube right now, or podcasts, there's Dhamma talk, Dhamma teachers showing up everywhere. So we have to be practicing diligence and investigation to understand, okay, what is the message that I'm being given here? Simply because I have to warn people about this, because I have seen it where even some students, without having tasted any fruits, want to become Dhamma teachers. They don't even understand the Four Noble Truths. And that is the quintessential analogy or image of the blind leading the blind. And where are we going to end up with the blind leading the blind? Falling into the hole, into the ignorance. So there is a responsibility on the part of the listener, the audience members, to always process, listen, but don't accept on faith or belief or whatever. Because I have 3,000 followers or sitting here with 3 million YouTube viewers or whatever, that means nothing. Nothing. How relevant is the message to you? Can you apply it? And is there a comparison? Can you sit down and look at the Buddha's own teachings and see, yeah, okay, this is the same thing, okay. Or is there a lot from the person, the teacher oneself, and having nothing to do with the Buddhist teaching? Because there are some teachers out there who even say that there is no rebirth, there is no karma. because we live in a time period where there's a lot of atheistic thinking and this and that, so things have to be matter of fact, etc. Be careful. So use your own diligence and your own discernment, your own wisdom. But ultimately, it all comes down to you. How well are you feeling now? Are you smiling? Because the moment you do, by the way, parts of the brain light up that are responsible also. They also light up when you fall in love. It's the same thing. You smile. They've done research on it. I think I've mentioned this a few times here. And the same opposite thing happens when you're frowning or you've got lines here. Cortisol levels go up. And that's the stress hormone that makes us fat, that makes us worry. That's cortisol. That's a stress hormone because it causes us to preserve energy because we're worried that the dinosaur is going to come and eat us. Yeah, from evolution, it's been left in parts of the brain. So by frowning, what you're doing is you're promoting cortisol levels to go up. Blood pressure goes up. And you lose the taste for a good life, enjoying life. Now, when you're smiling, it's the opposite. So which one are you going to choose? That is what I leave with you. So I will stop now, but I will be opening. Can we ask questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, any questions I would love to address? Not all at once, yes.
You mentioned on that triangle that you
Yes.
gave example earlier. We are on the very bottom, which is about security. So where is religion as far as on that steps goes?
You can find, it was not done by a spiritual or a religious person per se. It was done by Abraham Maslow, who was one of the proponents of Western psychology. But he was trying to find a diagram, a map that could help identify what we need in order for us to be full. So if I draw some similarities and try to look for some spiritual or religious aspect of it, I would see it in all of them, but especially in the top. Self-actualization. So for example, if I bring the example of the Buddha himself, I would say that the Buddha was a fully self-actualized being. So he was at the top of the pyramid. Now, having said that, I also have to explain that the Buddha never said only this is important. He also said the rest of it is important too. For example, whenever he went to meet some of his monks, somewhere in the forest or in the monastery, he would always ask, are you getting enough food? Because they have the bowl, they have to go house to house to get food. So he would ask, do you have a shelter? Do you have medicine? So what that is Maslow's the bottom row of security. Now the other one is the social aspect of it, the emotional connection. So the Buddha never taught monks or nuns to just live alone somewhere with no contact with human beings. Because if that was the case, we would not have Dhamma. So he would say, go ahead, practice alone, attain these states, become enlightened, but don't forget to come back and always interact with the people. And that's where they come in, the monks come in and share, the lay people help them by giving them food and support and money, whatever. But they're also gaining tremendous merits, but there is a connection. The Dhamma is being gone back and forth. So there's an interchange. So that's the other layer. So there's also that you can see, the religious aspect in the pyramid, etc., etc. So, and monks had to live together with other monks. See, there were fighting, there were arguments, there were disagreements, even at the time of the Buddha, between monks. Crazy, huh? But there were other monks too who were setting the proper example of loving kindness. Like Venerable Sariputta, before he went out on alms rounds, he was actually the last person who would leave the monastery. He would walk around the monastery to take care of all the sick monks. He would help clean up. He would sweep the floors. After he made sure the monastery was in perfect shape and everybody's taken care of, that's when he would go and on his alms round. Talk about social action, on a grassroots level. So you see it in all of the realms or rungs of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Don't be shy.
Yes. I'm going to ask something.
Yes, Yanti.
Yes. Now everybody say the healthy is the most important in your life. Because if you're healthy, you can do anything. But when something happened to your health, then you're gonna question it. Why me? It's happened. I already live healthy life, healthy food, something. But then I'll do whatever they said, then it's come back like this. So it's happened to my friend. Then I just can say, yeah, this is the karma that you have to pass. But this is easy for me to say, but it's happened to me. I don't know how to handle it. Now, yeah, he has a husband that's very devoted to her, and the kid that keep pushing him. Yes, this is right, mommy. This is the one. He told me that because he had a surgery at the spine, then it's turned out bad. It's very total. The neuron doesn't work at all. And it's been 3 months. And then the first time when I heard this, I don't want to talk to him because I know it's gonna be so hard. You go to the hospital where you can walk, and you come out with cannot walk. So I keep thinking of it. Yeah, it's easy for me. Keep pushing. It's okay. And then you do this, do that. It's easy for me to say, but I don't know if it's happened to me, what I should do. How to let it go. Something like that. It's easy to say, let it go. This is your karma. It's not so easy, right? In the practice.
One of the worst thing that a person could experience is if they are in that difficult situation and they are the ones who are suffering and they're trying their best to not suffer or to become better at least. Hearing other people say, no, you got to try harder. No, you're not trying hard enough. That's like pouring salt on an open wound. Painful. Even more than what they're experiencing. So in those moments, what needs to happen is, now there's so many elements to it. I don't want to give a simplistic answer to it because that would be not fair for your friend and what experiences she's going through. But you are right, there's many karmic fruits. See, when we say kamma, kamma is action. What we mean by that is we're talking about karmic fruits. The consequences, the effects of karma or actions we have committed. Like this person, for example. She goes in with all well intentions. Here's my insurance card. Do what you need to do. And she probably has had several second opinions and they have to open up her spine, this and that. And then she comes out worse. Nightmare. So she is living suffering, dukkha, every day. Now, is it a fact that she's suffering? Undeniable. It's there. Is she trying everything in her power not to suffer? Financially, she's paid him. She's gone to the best doctors, but something happened. Now it's there. It's a fact. Okay. That, we can call it pain. The thing which really gets to you is the suffering. See, there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain happens, it's sharp, it's acute, it's there, you cut your finger, whatever, it's there. Now, if I go ahead and perpetuate, It's like, this is my good hand. Like, why did that happen to me? Let's say if I'm a violin player and it's like my right hand, I'm gone. It's like, there goes that career. Why did it happen to me? Why not? Why not? Even the question, we have to see, not every question is a legitimate question to be getting a legitimate answer for. So sometimes we have to ask, is this the right question to ask? Why me? Why not me? I was 8 years old when in war in Lebanon, when the bomb falls and my foot is blown into pieces. My head is opened up like this. I wasn't going to make it. And there, for a long time I was thinking, why me? I was a child. I didn't do anything to anyone, this and that. It took away my... That is suffering. Me holding on and saying, why me? That should not happen to me. Maybe the neighbor's son, but not me. Right? So what am I doing? I'm actually now playing with the second noble truth. First, we established the fact that there is suffering. She's in pain. The second one is the reason why she's really suffering. See, physical pain can be tolerated to some degree. But the intellectual, the mental pain, that is something we have to be very careful about and for. See, the Buddha talked about two arrows that we are shot by. He says, if you practice this path, you can get rid of one of those arrows. That means one of the other arrows is still going to be with you until you die, until you become an arahant, in fact. So the arrow that he's talking about, that if you get rid of, is your attachment to the first arrow, meaning the body. So when I say the first arrow, I mean like the arrow that you can't get rid of is the body, which is going to get sick. It's going to experience all kinds of suffering. And that is something we all are going to be. As long as we're born, we're going to suffer. That's something you can tell your friend. But the key point for her to remember is her second arrow, her attachment to the suffering itself. And the suffering comes because she's craving, she's holding on to the idea that this should not be here. I should not be suffering. That's like a mantra in her mind. I had all good intentions. I came to the hospital. What was she expecting to live forever? Ask her. And she will be surprised. Well, of course not. I was expecting one day to die. But for another 60 years to be happy, healthy. How will we know? Maybe by the time we're going back, like something might happen, and I get into an accident and I die today. I don't know. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to hold on to that image. And then reminding her that the moment she lets go of that craving, she's going to experience a mini nibbana. That's what we mean by the third noble truth, cessation of dukkha. Dukkha nirodha is cessation. What that means is your friend has the potential to let go. And you can even practice this with her. Very simple. Get keys or something that's on her table when you go visit her. Have her hold on to the keys like this. And say, this is the suffering. This is the suffering. The pain that you're experiencing because now neurologically you're not the same as you were. And you're never going to get better. Yes? Okay, that's this. Here. You holding on to the suffering is this. Eventually it gets heavy, 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 heavy. Now, the moment you realize that you are responsible for this to stay here, and then you do something about it, and then you say, okay, I'm no longer going to be craving anymore. I see it's happened, so what? It's there. My body's going to suffer, but mentally I'm not going to hold on. Why me? Why me? And I'm just going to do this. What happened? Where is it? See, when we talk about the Buddha's path, we're talking about something very simple in its essence, in its teaching. That's why it was so attractive, and so many people got it. They got it, and they became enlightened. So your friend can actually use the pain to really jump up several levels up. Because a person who has not known suffering, really known suffering, cannot become enlightened. That's another secret. If you have not really, really tasted, no suffering for yourself, deep in your heart, but realize the mechanism, see, that's why the Buddha said, this path is not for everyone. It is for those people who know and understand suffering. Your friend knows suffering very well. Now, she has an opportunity to break away. So that's why she needs to practice the Fourth Noble Truth, which is the right view, which says, why not me? No one told me that you're never going to get sick ever. No one told me that you're going to make mistakes or not make mistakes. So it's just a process. So thinking of her mindset is extremely important. So she has to set herself up in the right way. And by seeing that she's involved in the perpetuation, continuation of her own suffering. The surgery was done, that was then. Something happened. Okay. That's then, done, in the past. But she carrying over is true suffering. She does not need to be suffering. I hope, to some degree that helps.
Yeah, I agree with it. Here, her denial is angry with everybody, her husband, everybody. Just blame everybody.
That's what craving does.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, she's not smiling.
He's far away.
Yeah.
He's in New Zealand.
Yeah, but you can actually send her, hold her image in your mind, bring her in your heart, place her in your heart, and just keep radiating metta to her.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you don't know the technique of metta, I have it on YouTube. You can go and you can even show you can send the link to your friend. She can sit there, even in the hospital, she can watch it.
Yeah.
And she can practice it. So.
Yeah, he's a little bit better, but now the mind is, I feel it is she accepted it.
That's
too.
good.
Yeah, it's been three months before. The first time she's so angry, it's let her talk. Then she know that she's not right to angry to everybody. It happened to her. When she asked me why me, it's hard for me to answer.
I know. If you're a good friend, you're going to say, well, I know. Instead of saying, why not you? Sometimes it could be too heavy.
I just send a link that's something, the good link that's on YouTube too.
Yeah. She needs support.
Yes.
That she's not alone.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments, questions? Yes.
I guess somewhat related to that, but if you bring it further, in life you always have a interaction with other people. When you have a disagreement or misunderstanding with people, there are always these two different opinions that each of them think that they are the right one, right? Now, as a Buddhist, you understand that maybe this suffering, this disagreement, because you have some kind of karma related to this person in the past. Now you always has this constant disagreement with this person, and you either could say, oh, okay, this is my karma and I accept it, I just backed out, or you can say, well, if I keep backing up, then he's going to push me even further. So how do you resolve this situation?
There's a third option also. And that has to do with my attitude towards the argument that I'm making with this person. Because you're right, arguments don't just happen one-sidedly. You need one or more contrary positions. And what I always ask is, how much am I attached to my point of view. Because oftentimes we forget that this person, if they're saying these things, no matter how stupid or crazy it is sounding to you, to them it's real. So what I would encourage you to do is, okay, forget about the karma part. See, sometimes we put too much emphasis on, oh yeah, this is karma. That's copping out. That's like making excuses and not taking responsibilities now. Let's say I would have said to Yanti right now about her friend, that's her karma. Forget it. She's done. I mean, that's it. No. The Buddha did not say just give it up to karma and just say, okay, hands up. I was like, I give up. You run the show. No. Yanti's friend has the right and ability to do something now. So she's playing a role to perpetuate, to continue the suffering. So she has the ability or the possibility to say, maybe I have something that I can do to change things, at least in getting rid of my attachment to the pain. That's crucial. Similarly here, obviously when you're having an argument, there's suffering, right? Why doesn't he see my point? What is he, nuts? Well, you go home and you're sitting with your wife, she's like, what's wrong? Well, I can't believe he's doing. What is that? You're carrying the pain, suffering, dukkha. Why? Somebody's holding on to something. Now, if your friend said, yes, you're right. Oh, thank you. Finally. What happens is like, yes, and that's what you want. Why? Because you're craving something that is not there. Second noble truth. The third one is the moment you realize this, is like, no, that's his viewpoint. Who knows? Maybe somebody didn't hug him enough when he was a child. Maybe somebody stepped on his foot 5 minutes ago and you show up and he's like, no, I'm going to argue with someone. And he picks you. So it has nothing to do with you and your viewpoint ultimately. When that moment comes for that person to realize, and if that is in the case that your point is the most valid one, then they'll see, oh yeah, he was right. But you should not set your bed waiting for that moment to come. Your job is to realize that there's suffering here. And one of the tricks that I use is I put myself in that person's shoes. I pretend I'm them. I pretend that I have the same job. I pretend that I have, very quickly, I have the same spouse or partner, whatever situation. And then I say, I see. Because in life, this person has not had the same experiences as you, has he? So he cannot possibly know what you know, can he? There you go. Third noble truth. And what you're practicing, all of these things, is the Eightfold Path. That's what I'm describing. So when you say, let me put myself in that person's shoe, you're already using right view. You're using right thought. And guess what? The next word that comes out of your mouth is right speech. You're not going to say, oh, you're stupid, man. I can't believe you're using that idea. Who believes that? That's the wrong speech. So by me saying, you know what? That could be true in certain situations, but I might not agree with that. Not say you're wrong. That's wrong speech. But the earlier one is right speech. So already you're doing also right action. What are we doing? The fourth noble truth, which is the Eightfold Path. And that brings serenity of mind, which brings about, right effort is there, but it brings about mindfulness, right mindfulness. So when you're sitting across the table with your wife or children, you're going to see them, not see the argument. You're going to see them. And they're going to see and feel your energy and say, Dad, why is the sea turtle so cool? Right? That's what Eden was talking about earlier. So does that make sense? So the pain that's happening, the disagreement, I always tell people, it's never about the outside world. I tell people, how many fingers are pointing forward to the other person?
One.
How many fingers are pointing back at me? Well, maybe 4, yeah. If you remember that, that's actually, that can help you a lot in life. It's never about the outside world, really, when you come down to it. I have to take part in my suffering. Right? So, any other questions? I know the legs are getting, painful and stuff. Yes, yes.
I was wondering about what you said when your father passed away, and you try to tell him nice stories to make him happy, because it is important your state of mind before you pass to the next life. And I also know in Tibetan tradition they have this so-called book of the dead, where they will keep chanting and chanting after the person died, because they believe that their soul is kind of lost after they pass away. Do you believe that that will also help in our tradition, that we're supposed to do that after our loved one pass away? Keep chanting and chanting for how many days, whatever they believe.
In Tibetan tradition, you have this, which comes actually from even before Buddhism went to Tibet in around 1,000 years ago. So many of the local non-Buddhist traditions, or Bon tradition, they merged into the Buddhist path, and that's how you have Tibetan Buddhism be so different in many ways. And one of them is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Bardo Todol. And they go through the several weeks of chanting, and some of them actually chant throughout life. They don't understand the meaning, but it's just a chant. It's like a security blanket that we were talking about, because they don't want to end up in a lower realm. They want to be reborn or go into the light and become enlightened through the transition of states. Now, coming back to the main point that I think you're trying to ask is should we incorporate that in our lives? I don't know about you, but life is very hectic, especially in the West. We don't have time to sit and chant a whole book on a daily basis, or even for weeks on end, sitting with the loved one that is passing. And plus, this tradition itself is not found in the earliest teachings of the Buddha. You don't see it at all. However, the Buddha talked about having an uplifted mind. Uplifted mind is what I'm trying to describe to you as when you're smiling, you have an uplifted mind. It's the opposite of cortisol that I mentioned earlier. When you smile, you're lifting your heart up. It's a joyful state. So which one's easier? Because they both presumably do the same thing. Presumably, because I used to practice the Bardo Todol for a little while, and I studied Tibetan Buddhism for many years. But when I came back to the earliest teaching, I saw it to be much more relevant to the lives that we live. And plus, I wanted to go back to the original teachings and see which one is Buddha's words and which one is not. And I've seen the effects of it. When you, even a joke, say tell a person or some funny thing that happened between that person who's dying and you witnessed it. Oh, do you remember that time that you told me about when you were helping someone and you slipped and you fell and you dropped the watermelon on your head? All of a sudden they crack up. They start laughing. You took them rocket ship. It's like a supersonic into a state of joy. I didn't chant anything. Now, as far as chanting goes, I always advise people, whether they're Buddhist or not, please remind them of the 5 precepts before they die. So if they understand Pali, or if their own local language, have them chant the 5 precepts. It's very important that at least they will be reborn as a human being. That's crucial. Okay, but when you are laughing, you cannot break any precepts, by the way. When you're smiling, you cannot break precepts. You cannot steal when you're having loving kindness in your heart. It's impossible to be angry at someone. So already A smile also allows you to practice the Panchasila. Interesting. So, if there's any chanting involved, I would recommend, if they come from a traditional Buddhist background, I would highly encourage them to, to chant, the Triple Refuge and Itipiso, Bhagava, all the qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. That's very powerful. But remember, the most important thing is to keep them in a smiling, happy mood. Anything that helps them to get there, perfect. Even YouTube, watching funny YouTube videos of cats and dogs helps. Just to remove them from their feeling like life is done. Just to get them out of there and just say, to get them to the same state as these kids. And I think you had a question, and I think we can round it off. Yes?
Oh, yeah. Just, you mentioned earlier, but the loved one is the cause of the suffering. The loved one is the cause of the suffering.
Laws of discovery?
The loved one. The loved one.
Loved ones, yes.
How we do the striking balance between, we're still showing the love, but we just try to avoid the suffering as well. What's the striking balance like? What should we do as a Buddhist in the daily life?
When you are thinking about your loved ones, what do you do as work?
Oh, as law enforcement.
Law enforcement. So let's say you're in a very critical position, right? And you have to be there 100%, right? Especially if it's a life and death situation or something. Fine. Can you keep thinking about your child or your loved one at that moment? Why?
Because my mind's focused on that.
Yes. So it's very similar to that. So now if you constantly are thinking about your loved one, then that means that you're attached. Sometimes people confuse when we say don't be attached, or non-attachment and detachment. Detachment is like getting scissors and cutting it. I don't care. Non-attachment is you're still in it, but you're allowing yourself. It's like oil and water. If you drop a few drops of oil inside water, what happens? You see the oil dancing, but it's there. It's not saying I'm out, I'm going away. So, bringing that mindset, when it's causing you, see, the Buddha's litmus test is very simple. Is there suffering? Are you suffering when you're thinking about your loved one? That's the question. See, I might, if I love someone, and wherever I go, I'm constantly thinking about them. I'm constantly thinking, are they happy now? Are they happy now? Are they happy now? Are they safe now? Are they safe now? I was born in Lebanon, I mentioned this before, but my dad one time, for many years actually, around 5 or 6 p.m. was when my dad had to come back from work. And as a child, we're waiting to have dinner for my dad. And because there were bombs, car bombs blowing up, people were kidnapped. You didn't know if your dad was going to be next. As a child, I would just worry. So I was in constant state of trauma and stress and anxiety. And I would pray, I come from a Christian background, so I would just sit down and beg God that something good happens. I promise him this, I promise, just make sure my dad comes home. That's the limited mindset that I had. But he was also my safety, but he was also my dad, so I had to make sure that he comes back safe. But what was I doing? I had completely enveloped him and said, I don't accept anything except dad coming back safe. That's the mindset. That is attached. Because why? How do I know that I was attached? How do I know? Huh? Worry? What is worry? Another word for worry.
Suffering.
Worry, hatred, all these things. Like I asked him, given the argument, that he's having with his friend, what's the flavor of the experience when he leaves that argument? Suffering. So that's the clue. I don't care if it's loved one, this and that. If you're suffering because of something, there's a craving somewhere. There's an attachment somewhere. See, sometimes people actually, when I do long retreats, meditation retreats, I see people even holding on to the attainments. Oh, I experienced the jhana. Even sometimes people who experience the first stage of awakening, Sotapanna or Sakadagami, they're attached. And what I do is I go around and I poke them. And I say, who are you attached to? What is this thing called attainment that you have, supposedly? Ooh, like a balloon that got deflated. As the job of a teacher is always to wake people up from being attached to things. And that is what we sometimes get caught up, even in our families. I love my child, I love my dad, I love my wife, I love my brother, this and that. But in essence, we have to ask, like your friend is attached to the body being healthy image. Well, the body is born and it will die. These children inside, they're going to grow up and they're going to get old like us and they're going to die one day. It's a fact. Some people came to the Buddha and said, why do people suffer? Why do I have to suffer? And he asked them, were you born? And the man looked at him and said, yeah. What kind of a question is that? Well, because of that, you're going to die. Before you die, you're going to suffer. Somehow. Now, but we have a choice. Do we continue suffering or not? And that is what I want you to bring into your context of looking at your loved ones. Do they have to be a cause of suffering? Absolutely not. But they can be. So that is what I would present to you, or have you look at it in that angle. So you're enjoying your children, your family. Beautiful. But if you're constantly worrying, I wonder how they're crossing the street. Just like I used to worry about my dad getting home safe every single night. Every time my dad left the house, I was like, is he going to come back? What is that? Attachment. So when it gets to that point, that's suffering. Watch out. That's how I would tell apart a healthy living and one that is not healthy. So because whether we like it or not, we share the same DNA, or we love. I mean, your friend is in New Zealand and you're caring about her enough to talk about her here. That means you love her. There's a connection. But that is also some form of a healthy attachment. We need that. In psychology and therapy, we do have attachment as a crucial part of one of those pyramid layers. It becomes dangerous when we take it to the next level of becoming too attached. It's obsession. So I hope that helps.
I get the idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.